At my graduation ceremony, I quietly transferred my entire $5 million inheritance from my grandfather into a trust under my name. Nobody noticed. Nobody asked why. The next morning, my parents and my brother woke up expecting to access the money they thought was waiting for them. Instead, they found every door locked. That's when my phone started ringing. The folding chairs were set out on the lawn by the lake, white, in rows of 40, and the program said the ceremony would begin at 4. I was in the second row, cap on, gown zipped over a dress I bought on clearance, and my phone was resting face down against my knee. The secure link had come through. That morning at 9:12, I had read every page twice in the parking structure before walking over, sitting in my car, with the engine off, scrolling slowly, the way my grandfather taught me to read. Anything I was about to sign, read it! Like the other party is hoping you'll skim, he used to say. Then read it again, like you're the other party. The dean talked about bright futures. He talked about the doors that were about to open for us, which I thought was a funny choice of words considering somewhere in the middle of the speech, while a soft wind came off the water, and a child 2 rows back asked her mother, how much longer? I lifted the phone a few inches, opened the link, and signed the final confirmation with my fingertip. One signature, a box to check, a button that said, submit. The confirmation email arrived at 4:47 p.m. Transfer of assets complete. I put the phone face down again and apt for graduate, whose name was being read, a stranger in a blue cord, and nobody around me saw anything but a young woman clapping politely at her own commencement. By the time I walked across the stage, shook the dean's hand and took the leather folder with the diploma that wasn't actually in it yet. Every dollar my grandfather left me was sealed inside an irrevocable trust that only I controlled. A little over $5 million, $5.2 million by the final accounting. Locked, documented, done. Afterward, there were photos on the lawn. My mother arranged everyone the way she arranges everything, by height and by who she wanted standing next to whom. My father put his hand on my shoulder and squeezed twice. My brother threw an arm around my neck and said, smile, you're rich now. And everyone laughed, including me. We had dinner that night at the restaurant. My grandfather loved the one with the white tablecloths and the waiter who still remembered his order. My father stood and gave a toast about how proud my grandfather would have been, and everyone raised a glass to the future. My brother bought me a drink I didn't ask for and said, now that school's done, we should talk Monday. My mother photographed the table, the food, the menu, me, and posted all of it before the entree arrived. I smiled. I said, thank you. I said, Monday. Sure. I slept that night with my phone on the nightstand charged to 100% because I knew exactly what was coming. It started ringing at 7:52 the next morning. To explain the morning the phones rang, I have to go back 3 years to a June evening when my grandfather knocked on the door of the carriage house behind his home. I was living there that summer, between the first and second year of my master's program, interning downtown at a wealth management firm and paying him $400 a month in rent. I found out much later that he was spending more than that on the groceries that kept appearing in the carriage house kitchen bags. I never saw him carry milk and bread, and the coffee I liked restocked, like the place stocked itself. That was him. He subsidized you quietly and let you believe you were standing on your own because he knew the believing mattered more than the standing. It was 7:30 in the evening, and the light was coming gold through the oak trees when he knocked. He never knocked. He owned the building. That was the first thing that told me something was wrong. Can we talk in my study? He said the study was on the second floor of the main house. Hey! Room I'd known my whole life. Books too. The ceiling. A reading chair worn down. At the arms, the desk that had belonged to his father, mahogany with a brass lamp. And a blotter and a drawer that locked. On the bottom shelf in a row were the green ledgers. He'd kept them since before I was born. One a year every year. And as a kid, I assumed they were for the firm. They weren't. The firm had accountants. The ledgers were his. He sat in the reading chair and pointed me to the seat across from him. And he told me the way he told clients about a market correction. Calm, level, no. Preamble. I've been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors are giving me 12 to 18 months. I remember. The room got very specific all at once. The lamp, the dust, and the light. The sound of a sprinkler starting up. Somewhere outside. He was 76 years old and played tennis on Tuesdays and still worked 5 days a week at the firm he had built from a rented room above a sandwich shop. And I sat there waiting for the part where the sentence got revised. He held up his hand before I could speak. I'm telling you first, he said, before your father, before your mother, before your brother, because you're the only person in this family who's going to hear this and ask me what I need instead of asking what I'm leaving behind. I didn't understand yet that he was testing me or that the test had already started or that everything that happened over the next 4 years would trace back to this room. I just looked at him and my hands folded themselves in my lap and I asked him what he needed. He smiled. He looked for a second, enormously satisfied, like a man watching a long position finally pay. That he said, that's why. That's why. What? I asked. That's why it's going to be you. My grandfather had spent 4 decades watching people handle money. It was his profession, and it was also, I think, his way of reading character. The way some men read faces or handshakes. People tell you who they are when they think no one is keeping track. He told me once, and the joke buried in that sentence, the joke I wouldn't fully get for 3 more years, is that he was always keeping track. He had watched my father, his own son, become a senior man at the firm, brilliant with other people's portfolios and a disaster with his own. My parents lived in a house worth $3 million that they had refinanced twice, and after 30 years of payments, they still owed $480,000 on it. They drove leased cars they traded up every 3 years. They took trips that arrived on credit cards and got documented for an audience of acquaintances. My father earned real money and spent slightly more than all of it every year on the theory that the next year would cover the difference. The next year never had to because his father was alive. He had watched my mother build a life out of managing appearances. She quit working when my brother was born and ran the family calendar with the precision of a military operation, and she redecorated in cycles the kitchen, then the bathrooms, then the kitchen again. Each cycle a little ahead of what the accounts could carry. She was not frivolous exactly. She was a planner. The problem was what she planned with. She planned with money that hadn't arrived yet. Money that existed mostly as expectation. And the expectation had a name and a study and a guest house, and it was dying. And he had watched my brother 3 years older than me, a sales job downtown, $110,000 a year, and a permanent founder's gleam. There had been a meal delivery concept. $28,000 of my parents' money never Launched a crypto trading app, $22,000. Lost a luxury car rental venture. $45,000 dead on arrival when no insurer would touch it. $95,000 borrowed across 5 years with sincere promises each time. Repaid in the amount of $0. My brother believed in his future the way other people believe in religion completely and without bookkeeping. And my parents funded the faith because saying yes was easier than the conversation that came with no. Then there was me. I was 23. That summer, I had saved $11,000 from my first internship. I was putting 40% of every paycheck into index funds. I packed my lunch in a building full of catered meetings, and I lived in his carriage house for $400 a month. And on Sunday nights, I did my own version of his ledgers, a spreadsheet, every dollar accounted for, because he had taught me when I was 12 with a $20 bill in a savings register that money you don't watch becomes money you don't have. That evening in the study, after he told me about the cancer, he laid all of it out. Not cruelly. He loved them. That was never the question. He went through the family, the way he'd go through a balance sheet, line by line, and then he told me what he intended to do. The firm has a succession plan. He said, your father will inherit a partnership stake worth several million. He will be comfortable for the rest of his life if he chooses to be. The personal estate, the house, the accounts, all of it goes to you. I actually looked behind me like there might be another grandchild standing in the doorway. If I leave it to your father, he said, it will be gone in 10 years. It will go into that house and those cars and your brother's next 3 certainties. If I leave it to your mother, it will become a renovation. If I leave it to your brother, it will become a press release and then a lesson. You're the only one who will still have it in 30 years. And more than that, you're the only one who understands that keeping it is not the same as hoarding it. Wealth isn't what you spend, he said. It's what you keep working. He said it with my full name attached first and middle, the way he only used my name when he was filing something permanently. They're going to hate me, I said. Probably, he said, for a while. That's why we're not going to tell them. And that's why we're going to build it so they can't reach it. So that when the hating starts, it lands on the structure instead of on you. You'll be the messenger, not the wall. I'll be the wall. I'm very comfortable being the wall. I'll be dead. We met once a month. After that, always in the study, always in the evening when the house was empty. If anyone asked, I was helping him organize his library, which was even true in the sense that 2 or 3 books got moved every visit. In August, he introduced me to his estate attorney. Her office was downtown 11th floor, a corner room with a view of the water and not one personal photograph anywhere, which I came to understand was its own kind of credential. She was in her early 60s and had the bearing of a woman who had sat through every possible version of a family discovering a will and had been surprised by none of them. Your grandfather wants an irrevocable trust. She told me in that first meeting, I want to make sure you understand the word irrevocable because most people hear it as a formality. It is not a formality. Once this is established and funded, it cannot be undone. Not by your family, not by a judge having a sympathetic afternoon, not by you. Why? Irrevocable? I asked. Because revocable can be argued with, she said. Undo. Influence. Diminished capacity. A dozen theories a motivated relative can rend a lawyer to advance. Irrevocable. Properly built with capacity documented is a door without a handle. People can pound on it. Pounding is free. Opening is not. Available. The structure took a year and a half to finish. I was the sole beneficiary and the sole trustee. Distributions were meant for education, for help or investment in appreciating assets. Each one documented, each one logged. And then there was the clause my grandfather insisted on personally, the one the attorney read out loud to me, twice to make sure I understood it. Any distribution to a family member outside of education or medical need would trigger a penalty, an automatic 50% reduction in my own permitted distributions for 5 years. He's tying your hands on purpose, the attorney said, so that when they ask, and they will ask, the answer is not you saying no. The answer is the trust saying no. You're not the wall. You're just the person standing next to it. He did 2 sessions with a psychiatrist that all voluntarily on the record establishing testamentary capacity while he was still beating the doctor's timeline. He anticipates a challenge. The attorney told me he would like the challenge to die in a file cabinet, and he chose the funding date himself. The estate would sit in administration after his death, managed untouched until one defined day, the day of my graduation, when the assets would move into the trust upon my signed confirmation. I asked him why that day. Why not immediately? Why not my birthday? Or some clean 1st of January? Because I want you to walk off that stage already. Holding it, he said, not waiting for it, not hoping about it, holding it. There's a difference between a person who is going to have money and a person who has it. And I want you to be the second one. Before anyone in that audience stands up from their holding chair near the end of that spring in one of our last meetings at the office, he spent most of an afternoon at the attorney's conference table with a legal pad, writing. He went through 3 drafts. I wasn't allowed to see any of them. When he finished, he sealed the letter in a heavy envelope, wrote my name on the front in the careful block printing he saved for documents, and handed it to the attorney, not to me. She holds it. He said, you get it the morning after your graduation, not one day before. You'll know why when you read it. I asked him what was in it. The weather forecast, he said, and he smiled like that was the best joke he told in years. Looking back, it was the chemotherapy worked until it didn't. He beat the 12 months and then the 18, and somewhere in the 3rd year, the treatment stopped doing anything but subtracting from him. In March, he stopped going into the firm. In April, the hospice people came to the house. Kind, quiet professionals who moved furniture and changed everything by changing very little. I visited every day after class. Some days we talked. He wanted updates on my coursework, on the markets, on whether I was still packing my lunch, which he asked about the way other grandfathers ask about boyfriends. Some days we said almost nothing, and I sat in the study reading while he slept in the chair, and the green ledger sat in their row on the bottom shelf, and I still didn't understand what they were. He died in May at 11:20 on a Tuesday night in the house, with me holding one of his hands and my father holding the other. Whatever else I will ever say about my father, he was there, and his grief was real. And in that room for one night, we were just 2 people losing the same man at 2 different distances. The funeral filled the church, and then some 400 people, clients and colleagues and competitors, and the waiter from the restaurant who came on his day off and stood in the back in a pressed shirt. My father gave the eulogy. It was good. It was polished and warm, and it was about the businessman, the mentor, the builder, the legend who started above a sandwich shop. Listening to it, you would not have known the man had grandchildren. I didn't cry during the service. I had done my crying in the carriage house in private on the schedule he and I had kept for 3 years, which is to say where nobody else could see the book. The will reading was 2 weeks later at the attorney's office in a conference room with water glasses. Nobody touched. My parents sat on one side, my brother next to them, me at the end, and the attorney read in the unhurried voice of a woman who knew exactly which paragraph the room was waiting for and saw no reason to rush toward the explosion. The firm came. First, the succession plan, the partnership stakes, my father's share, worth millions on its own. I watched his shoulders come down an inch. Whatever he had aired, the firm was safe. His position was safe. The order of the world was holding. Then she reached the personal estate, the residence, the investment accounts, the cash reserves, all remaining personal assets to his granddaughter in their entirety to be held in an irrevocable trust established more than 2 years prior, signed, notarized, capacity documented, to his son, the watch collection, and the library to his grandson, the vintage convertible in the garage. For a moment, nobody moved, and the room did that thing rooms do when arithmetic is happening silently in several heads at once. A watch collection, my mother said. Her voice was flat in a way I had never heard. A watch collection and books. The personal estate totals approximately $5.2 million. The attorney said all of it transfers to the trust. My brother said, "Wait, what? About us?" And the sentence just sat there because there was no formal answer to it, because the document was the answer to it. My father turned and looked at me. "Did you know about this?" I could have softened it. I had rehearsed softer versions in the shower for 2 years. What came out was the truth at its actual temperature. Since the diagnosis, I said, he told me first. The whole time, my mother said, 3 years. You sat at every dinner, every holiday. You watched us and you knew and you said nothing. He asked me not to. How convenient, she said. The attorney intervened then professionally to note that the trust had been established with full documentation of capacity, that contesting it was their right, and that her client had anticipated the possibility and left detailed records of his reasoning. The word records did not land on me the way it should have. I thought she meant the psychiatric file. She did not only mean the psychiatric file. In the parking garage afterward, my brother caught my arm. "You lived in his guest house," he said. "You were over there every day. You drank coffee with him every morning while the rest of us were working. And now we're supposed to believe this was all his idea." It was all his idea. I said, "You're going to fix this," my mother said from beside the car. She wasn't shouting. Planning. Voices don't shout. The trust pays out when you graduate. We'll discuss it as a family before then. That was the sentence right there in a concrete garage 2 weeks after we buried him. The trust pays out when you graduate. Somewhere between the conference room and the elevator, the facts had already been revised into something survivable. And in the revised version, the trust wasn't a wall. It was a waiting period. The year between the will reading and my graduation, my family conducted a campaign. I don't know a better word for it. It had phases and personnel and a target. And the target was a date 11 months out. And the operating theory underneath all of it was the one my mother had announced in the parking garage. The money becomes available when she graduates. Available was doing a lot of quiet work in that sentence. Available to whom was the part nobody said out loud, because saying it out loud would have required someone to look directly at the will. My mother called. Twice a week. The calls were warm at first recipes and relatives, and then somewhere in Man 6 they would arrive. Every time at the same coastline. The house was getting old. It's a kitchen. You know, families help each other. Your grandfather, God rest him, would never have wanted division. She started sending me articles, links with subject. Lines like worth a read about generosity, about the psychology of inherited wealth, about siblings arranged by money. This last one presented as a cautionary tale with the moral aimed carefully in one direction. My father worked in documents because my father has always worked in documents. In December, at a dinner at their house, he slid a printed bound proposal across the table to me between the salad and the roast. Family allocation framework, it said on the cover, which he had clearly formatted himself. Inside were pie charts, a house purchased for me in a suburb I had not chosen, equity, schools, resale, and investment in my brother's next venture, projected returns in a bond that did not believe in itself, and a pulled family investment vehicle professionally managed, the manager being him. The trust doesn't permit any of this, I said. You are the trust, he said, patiently, like I was a junior associate, missing the obvious. You're the trustee. Trustees have discretion. The discretion has rules, I said. Distributions to family outside. Education or medical need cut my own. Access in half for 5 years. It's in the instrument. You can read it. Who wrote that in? He asked. And for 1 second, one bare second, the patient slipped and something else looked out. And then the patience came back and refilled his face. Your grandfather was a careful man, he said. I'm sure he didn't intend it to apply to circumstances like these. He wrote it for exactly these circumstances, I said. And the dinner moved on the way dinners in my family always moved on by agreeing the weather was unusual for December. My brother ran his own smaller program. Venmo requests. $60, $90, captioned with jokes. Gas. Money LOL. Consider it a family discount. Small asks spaced out the way. You'd test an electric fence with a blade of grass before committing your hand. I declined everyone. In March, he sent me a text that said, "Oh, being rich and alone is everything you wanted." And then 3 weeks later, as if the text had never happened, a slide deck. What none of them ever asked, not once in 11 months, was the only question that mattered. Not what does the trust allow, not can we see the instrument. The question they never asked was what I wanted. Because in the operating theory, I wasn't a person with wants. I was weather between them and a harvest. 11 days before my graduation, my brother signed a lease on 2,400 feet of office space for a company that did not exist. I didn't know it yet. He put my inheritance down as proof of funds. He told the landlord the wire would come the Monday after his sister's graduation. And he said it, I'm told, with total confidence. And the terrible thing, the thing I keep turning over is that the confidence was real. In his version of the world, the money was already his. It had been his since the parking garage. All I had to do was graduate. The morning after the ceremony, I was up at 7 o'clock. I made coffee. I rinsed the mug and set it in the rack, and I sat at my kitchen table with the envelope I had been given the afternoon before, still sealed because the instructions said the morning after. And I had not come this far to start improvising on the last page of his choreography. The attorney had handed it to me at 5:30 the previous day outside the ceremony in a crowd of gowns. He said the morning after, she told me, not one day before, call me when you've read it. At 7:52, the phone rang. My brother skipped hello. He was walking somewhere. Whined on the microphone, his voice up. In the bright register he used for closing, so the funds landed right, he said. Everything cleared yesterday? The trust funded yesterday? I said, if that's what you mean. Perfect, he said. Perfect. Okay, so small time pressure. On my end, the landlord needs the wire. Monday by noon. First, last security. It comes to 415. I'll text you the wiring. Instructions. It's all set up. Super. Clean. I looked at my coffee. What? Landlord? For the office, he said. 2,400 feet. Exposed brick. The whole thing. I signed 11 days ago. I didn't want to lose it before your thing wrapped up. They needed proof of funds, so I showed them the estate paperwork. Your paperwork, technically, I guess. Whatever. Family money. The wire goes. Monday and we're square. He said it the way you'd report a weather delay. Like, the situation contained no decisions. Only logistics, and the only variable left in the world was timing. No money. It's coming Monday, I said. He laughed. He genuinely laughed 2 full seconds. Then, the wind on the microphone stopped like he had stood still on a sidewalk. Somewhere. What do you mean it funded? You just said it funded into an irrevocable trust, I said. The one from the will reading. The one that's been signed for over 2 years. It doesn't make distributions like this. It can't. I can't. What do you mean trust? He said, and his voice had changed entirely now. The closing register gone. You're the trust. It's you. Don't do the robot voice. It's me. I signed a lease. No, I said. You signed it 11 days ago. With money that has never been yours for. A company that doesn't exist. I didn't co-sign anything. I didn't promise anything. I wasn't asked anything. You're unbelievable, he said. And some other things after that. And then the call ended, though not before I heard him say to himself, more than to me in a voice I'd never heard him use. He told me it was handled. I sat with that sentence. He told me it was handled. I was still sitting with it at 8:31 when my mother called. She opened mid-con conversation. No greeting. As if we had been talking for an hour already and I had just stepped out of the room. The contractor needs the balance scheduled by Wednesday, she said. They start in 2 weeks. I gave them your information for the remainder. So, expect a call from their office. A woman very organized. You'll like her. What contractor? I said. The kitchen. She said the full remodel. We put down the deposit last month. 40,000. It's non-refundable before you start, so there's no point relitigating. The decisions made were past that part. Who's we? I said the family. She said we discussed this. We have never discussed this. I said, you discussed it near me, over me for a year. That's not the same thing. There was a pause, and when she came back, her voice had the bright, brittle finish it gets in public. Your grandfather would be ashamed, she said. He believed in family. He believed in arithmetic, I said. And he did it for 30 years. I didn't know yet how. Literally, I meant that. I found out at 3:00 for that afternoon. The third call came at 9:15, and it was my father, and it was the voice. Anyone who has grown up adjacent to a man who manages money for a living knows the voice. It is the one for the client whose portfolio has dropped 11%. The voice with the warm floor and the handrails. Sweetheart, he said, I think there's been a misunderstanding about your grandfather's wishes, and I think the longer it sits, the worse it gets for everybody. These things harden. I'd like us to sit down today, all of us, with the estate attorney, and walk through it. Like adults. Neutral setting, everything. On the table, I let 2 seconds go by. I think that's a good idea, Dad, I said. Good, he said, exhaling the handrails. Relaxing. Good. I'll call her office and see when she can fit us in. 3 o'clock, I said. She can fit us in at 3. A pause. Very small. The sound of a man. Recalculating who placed this call. How? Do you know that? He said. Because I'm already sitting in her office. I had driven over at 8:40 between my mother's call and my father's with the envelope. On the passenger seat like a second. Passenger. The receptionist sent me straight back. The attorney was at her desk, and on the desk centered squared to the edges was a thin folder I did not pay attention to because I was busy with the envelope which she watched me set down in front of her. You read it, she said. This morning I sat at my kitchen table like you wanted. The letter was 3 pages handwritten in the careful block printing he saved for documents. It was dated 2 years before he died, and it was notarized, which I have since learned is not a thing people generally do to letters to their granddaughters, witnessed by the attorney and her paralegal stamped, sealed the personal made procedural, because he knew the difference between a letter and an exhibit, and he intended this to be both. The first line said, by the time you read this, the phone will already be ringing. I had read it at the table with my coffee going cold, and the sensation was not like reading a letter. It was like watching someone walk through a house in the dark without touching a single wall. Your brother will be first, he wrote. You will not ask, you will inform. There will already be a commitment, a lease, or a vendor or a partner, something with a signature and a deadline, because he has never once in his life waited to be given a thing before counting it. The deadline will be urgent, and the urgency will be presented as your responsibility. It is not your responsibility. You did not sign it. Your mother will be second. She will have committed money as well, but hers will be attached to the house because the house is where she keeps the version of the family she shows other people. She has spent 30 years committing money that had not arrived yet. The only thing that has changed is whose arrival she is counting on. Listen for the word we. The word we will be doing remarkable work. Your father will be last, and he will be the most reasonable person you have ever heard. He will propose a meeting. He will suggest neutral ground. He will use the phrase like adults. I want you to agree to the meeting, and I want you to underline this part. So he had underlined it himself twice in pen. Don't mistake reasonable for right. Reasonable is a tone. Right is a ledger. All of this will happen within 24 hours. He wrote, I have watched this family respond to money for longer than you have been alive. Consider this letter a forecast from a man who has seen the weather. He gave them 24 hours. They used 15. The last paragraph was instructions. Take the meeting, he wrote. Bring this letter. Read it to them if you want all of it. I have no pride left to protect. I'm dead. And then if and only if someone in that room claims to know my intentions, claims to speak for what I wanted, tell her I said, it's time. She'll know what that means. She's been keeping something for me longer than you'd believe. I looked up from the desk. The attorney had her hands folded on the thin folder, which I now noticed was not thin at all. It was the visible end of something held upright in a stand beside her chair. The way you'd rack a dictionary, he says. It's time, I said. If they claim to know his intentions, if they claim it, she said, not before. Those were his exact terms. He was very specific. He said, and she permitted herself the smallest professional smile they have to walk into it themselves. I'm not allowed to open the door for them. Neither are you. At noon, my father called her office and requested a family meeting and was told to his audible satisfaction that there had been a cancellation at 3 o'clock. They arrived at 3 amps exactly because my father is never late to anything except consequences. Through the glass wall of the conference room, I watched them come down the corridor in formation. My father in a blazer despite the heat. My mother in the pearl earrings she wears to win. My brother already talking, hands already moving. My mother did not look at me. When she sat down, she looked at a point just above my head, a trick she has, addressing the version of me she'd prefer. My brother dropped into his chair sideways and started in before his coffee was ordered. About good faith, about verbal agreements, about a thing called promissory estoppel that he had clearly Googled in the car and was holding the way a man holds a tool he found at the scene. My father waited. He let the room settle. Then he folded his hands on the table, looked at the attorney with immense courtesy, and said, "The sentence. I'd like you to help us understand," he said, "how my father's clear intention to provide for his family ended up so badly distorted. I knew the man for 54 years. I know what he wanted. And this," he gestured gently, "at the table, at the building, at me, isn't it?" The clock on the wall said 304. The attorney did not answer him. She looked at me instead, O'Neill. Look, and waited because those were the terms, and she does not improvise on a client's terms, even when the client is a year dead. I took the letter out of my bag, and I unfolded the 3 pages, and I said, "Before we discuss what he wanted, I'd like to read you what he wrote too. Years before he died, notarized the same week your Christmas card photo was taken, the one on the staircase. And I read it to them, all of it, the forecast, paragraph by paragraph. My brother, first he will not ask, he will inform. There will already be a signature and a deadline." My brother went very still at signature and deadline. The stillness of a man hearing his own footsteps, described by someone who wasn't there. My mother second, the house, the word, we. 30 years of committing money that hadn't arrived. Her face did not move, but her hand went to her earring and stayed there. My father laughed, the most reasonable man in the room, neutral, ground like adults. And when I read the underlined part, don't mistake reasonable for right. Reasonable is a tone. Right is a ledger. I watched my father's courtesy hold its shape the way ice holds its shape in the first second after the crack runs through it. I finished the last page, the part addressed to me, including I wanted them to hear it. The line about pride. I have no pride left to protect. I'm dead. Nobody laughed. He would have been disappointed. He thought it was funny. I folded the pages. The conference room hummed with climate control and 4 people's worth of recalculation. Then my brother said it. He leaned back, arms crossed, and aimed his chin at me and produced the only weapon left in the car he'd arrived in. "How long?" he said. "Have you been planning this?" And the attorney answered before I could. "He claimed to know your grandfather's intentions," she said. "To me, not to him. A procedural confirmation, like a launch officer reading back a code. At 3:04, you read the letter. The condition is satisfied." She reached to the stand beside her chair, and she lifted out the thing I had mistaken for a dictionary, and she set it on the conference table with a sound that ended every other sound in the room. A binder 4 and thick. Green, the exact green of the ledgers on the bottom shelf of the study. Because that is what it was. It was the ledgers. Consolidated copy tabbed by year 30. Tabs and on the spine in his block. Printing one word family. He kept the receipts. The attorneys said all of them. She opened it flat and turned it around to face them, and she read the way she reads everything, unhurried, exact. A woman who has seen every version of this and been surprised by none of them. Tab 3 credit card balances cleared. $9,400. The note in his handwriting. Beside the entry, they don't know I saw. The statement. Tab 7 down payment. Assistance on the house. $60,000. Documented as a loan. Promissory note. Attached, and she lifted the plastic sleeve so the page caught the light. Signed by both recipients. My mother's hand came off her earring. Tab 11. 6. Mortgage payments made directly to the bank. The year the firm had its bad stretch. $19,200. Note beside it. He never asked how the bank went quiet. He never asks how anything goes by it. Tab 19. The meal delivery venture. $28,000. Tab 22. The crypto application. $22,000. Note, he says this one is different. Tab 25. The car rental concept. $45,000. Note, he says this one is different. Underlined. The underline pressed hard. Enough to crease 3 pages. A tuition. Gap, a country club year, a boat deposit. I had never heard of in my life. The anniversary trip. The year I turned 9. $11,000 wired to a travel agency. Note. Beside it, she posted 41 photographs. He counted the photographs. Date, amount, check number, and the margins full of his patient block. Printing. 30 years of a man writing down exactly what he was watching while everyone watched him write and assumed it was for the firm. On the last page, there was a total carried forward. Year over year in his own hand, updated. Reconciled the way you'd maintain any long position. $312,000. $312,000, the attorney said, of quiet support characterized as loans in 14 instances with signatures in 9. Repaid in full or in part in 0. His instruction to me, and she read this from her own file verbatim. Show them the folder only if they claim to know my intentions. If they never claim it, shred it unopened. Let them keep the version they can live with. But if they claim it, show them a man's intentions are in his records. The room had stopped, pretending to breathe. My mother was staring at the table at the sleeve with the promissory note in it at her own signature from 30 years ago. Younger, rounder, optimistic. My brother had pulled the binder toward himself and was going through the tabs with increasing speed. Pages snapping, hunting through 30 years of entries like a man looking for the typo that would collapse the whole document and not finding it. Because there has never once been a typo. Because the man balanced these pages annually for 3 decades against statements he was not supposed to have. And my father had not moved at all. The attorney capped her pen and sat back. Finished for part of the instructions. Executed to the letter the way she had executed all of it for years for a client who paid her to be patient on a schedule he would not live to see. Nobody reached for the water glasses. The clock on the wall had made it to 3:51. Outside the glass wall, somewhere down the corridor, a phone was ringing in someone else's life, and it rang twice and stopped, and the conference room stayed exactly as it was. 4 people and a green binder and 30 years sitting open on the table between them. My mother had not looked up from the promissory note. My brother had stopped turning pages. He was resting on a tab. Somewhere in the early 20s, one hand flat on the paper, not reading anymore, just keeping it down. The way you told something that had stopped struggling And my father, who had not raised his voice once in 26 years, who gave the eulogy without notes, who had walked into this office at 3 o'clock certain the afternoon would end with the world return to its correct shape, sat looking at the binder for a long time, not at the total, at the margins, at 30 years of his own father's handwriting, patient, dated, watching the same block, printing that had signed his report, cards and his wedding card, and the back of every photograph in the study, keeping the books on all of them the entire time in plain sight on a shelf. Nobody ever thought to read. Then he said one sentence so he knew, yeah, Dad,